With talking about something as big as Disney, we always usually point out their films that have been released over the years. Because after all, this section of the company is what actually made it to what it is today that we are all grateful for in the pioneering of the modern film industry. But for me and so many others, the actual main heart that actually makes Disney is in fact their theme parks themselves. The places where both young and old actually coalesce and have fun together, where the tagline says, dreams come true. And that has been the case for me since I was a baby, starting with Disneyland in 2003, almost going every year since until COVID hit. Where there is just a quality about places like Disneyland that you cannot find anywhere else in the world, with proper theming and a grand sense of space that Walt Disney was just so good at creating for all of us to enjoy. But now here, of course, in the modern times, Disney has actually started to neglect certain aspects of what actually made us enjoy the Disney parks in the first place for the worse, charging us more and more money to actually get in and not providing the value that it should be known for, letting things break down often and not getting any proper care. And that is why I actually wanted to make this video today. Because the problems with Disney actually reflects in every single business aspect they own, which of course includes the theme parks that everyone enjoys, where it just cannot go away with a flick of a switch. This is something I touched in my downfall video a bit with my trip to Disneyland, but I actually wanted to create a more separate video to actually really discuss these issues head on, because ever since my trip back from then, the problems have only gotten worse in those resorts. And this video is also going to be the start of a new set of videos on my channel, where I will eventually explore the parks to discuss more of the specific issues that each one actually entails that I will mention briefly in this video right here, discussing from Disneyland to Disney World all the way to Tokyo Disney that seems almost free from all of the majority of issues that Disney is facing, due to the fact that Disney actually doesn't even own that resort. But for now, with what we actually have, these problems of course first start to show up in the prices in the parks themselves. Because recently, Disney has actually announced price increases for both Disney World and Disneyland, both in terms of the regular park tickets and their annual pass programs that actually came into immediate effect. And the problem with this is the fact that they've been doing this for so long, gradually rising as attendance also started to rise. The main point for actually doing this as numbers actually start to return to normal and more people overcrowd the parks. Because for so long, both the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland have remained to be the #1 and #2 most attended theme parks in the entire world, and only kept growing from there, where the only way they could easily solve this issue with the overcrowding was in fact to actually raise the prices, especially seen under the words of Bob Chapek's leadership of Disney after COVID and his introduction of this tiered reservation system to seemingly provide the best experience for the guests who actually do come. But sadly, with what we actually know, that isn't exactly what happened in between that time with the introduction of other systems like Disney's Genie, one I actually want to go in full depth when I return to Disneyland of how convoluted it actually is. Now of course, the basic essence is free, but if you want access to other things like Lightning Lane, you actually have to pay for that at a cost of about $30 per guest, keyword being there per guest, and not actually your entire party for the reasons of crowd control to skip most of the lines compared to the previous free FastPass system, where just in order to make your trip convenient, you just have to give Disney more money than you did before. It's even more expensive than it was during Walt's time if you even adjust that for inflation. More people just priced out. But really actually thinking about this system, it really felt like it was inevitably going to be dropped by Disney no matter what actually happened before or after the pandemic, seen of course in the opening of Galaxy's Edge that I discussed in my previous video. One that also includes their Galactic Star Cruiser project that failed miserably, mainly due to the problem of actually being expensive and money, where you shield probably the same amount of money to actually attend that hotel if you were to go to like Disney World or Disneyland, staying in an expensive prison. And that's an issue that extended earlier within Galaxy's Edge itself, being designed that way just as well before they officially opened their e-ticket attraction being Rise of the Resistance, which remains to be one of the most impressive Disney attractions and attractions in general that was ever made. But that still doesn't excuse most of the lackluster experience you get elsewhere that is designed to actually make you buy, like Savi's and the Droid Workshop, or just buying those Jedi robe outfits. Because of course, to get to the main attractions, you actually have to weave your way through the shops first that actually makes you buy these expensive products, which to be fair actually works because the Imagineers did an amazing job at crushing the landscape and designed a Batuu with Lucasfilm, an immersive experience that does transport you to another realm that we know in Disneyland that is quite different from the real world. Don't get me wrong, it's designed so well, but the main issue is the fact that it's designed to siphon the most out of your money. And this is a disheartening issue because Walt designed Disneyland with the intention that families could spend a good time together, where they don't have to stress about anything that happens in life just inside or out and just actually have fun with each other. But nowadays with these new types of experiences, it just causes more stress once again for those who actually want to experience to the max. I mean, you can still do without these new systems that they have, But it's not like that experience that Walt actually initially provided and ones we actually seen before COVID. New attractions and new ideas to constantly push the innovative nature of the story. And one of the main points that makes Disneyland work so well that Walt actually knew is its kinetic nature, the movement of people within the space. You can see this on Main Street with the horse-drawn streetcars moving up and down throughout the street and land, and with other transports like the Mark Twain riverboat and so forth that moves multiple people constantly throughout the entire experience. Something also found in Tomorrowland when the People Mover was actually there, constantly moving people to and from without any line, and how the monorail also moves you in and out in the park and out to downtown Disney. And most importantly above all, this kinetic energy is featured in the Disneyland Railroad. Because if any Disney fan knows, Walt Disney was just an avid lover of trains, where most of these Magic Kingdom style parks are circled around these trains that transport you around the entire park, moving from one scene to the next, and it's just very relaxing. The things that just constantly move inside and out are what adds another level of immersive activity that can actually make you fall in love with it, a charm that you can't find anywhere else in the world unless it's something that is distinctly Disney. And the point I'm just trying to make with this is the fact that things constantly move and change wherever you go, design being specifically for you, because as Walt Disney said, Disneyland is your land, and everyone gets treated the same, except when they start charging for specific experiences in certain areas of the park. How instead, in the modern era, we see the entire park experience slowly turned into Galaxy's Edge, the design seeping into all the areas that is directly controlled through the comfort of your own phone. Using the digital age as an asset to their new business, like how Lightning Lane is returning back to the good old days of Disney, where you not only had to spend money on admission, but also to ride the rides, the old system that charged you to spend on a certain ride. At least with Lightning Lane, it's not actually mandatory like the old system, but it is still there and people are willing to actually pay for it if it actually means they can get the most out of their service. The issue of servicing their higher paid once in a lifetime guests rather than their repeat locals that usually had annual passes, which also increased under this new system sadly. Where of course mentioning that new system, that also still blocks you out under the new reservation system that they have during peak time and whatever they want that you have to spend more money to do so. And these are issues that actually get more worse when you realize that their maintenance work hasn't actually been the greatest either. Parts of their attractions seem to actually be falling apart slowly or not actually even finished, and others are just constantly breaking down, which of course is in fact a normal thing to do so considering how many people actually ride and the cost to actually maintain such systems, but it's actually become more frequent than ever before. And in my downfall video, I mentioned earlier during the rise of executives like Paul Presser during the mid-90s and early 2000s during CEO Michael Eisner's last years, were just how many experiences were just toned down because of the cost they carried. They were just trying to cheapen the experience so that it could save some money and actually overcharge for what they actually have. And today, during Iger's leadership, it has actually circled back into that system, despite the fact that back in September, they were announcing $60 billion were going to be invested into the theme park business. I mean, with that announcement, things may change over time, but with what they have done at the current moment in time with the parks, it doesn't seem like they're able to fully commit to actually doing so for their guests or their cast members. And even though certain events like I'm going to mention tie into multiple things about the guests themselves, it kind of actually results in an uptick of angry guests who start to get into fights or do whatever it takes to get them banned. The issues of just being stressed out when actually getting here and trying to spend the best time you can here, becoming pretty burdensome to a certain experience even if that certain individual had already had other problems before and were just ticked off by that. They just don't want to make it easy for everyone involved, even if most are able to keep it down to just to have fun. But how can we have fun if they keep increasing the price and not really add anything meaningful to the experience? Because if you're able to have a team of creative people who can design attractions that are able to carry multiple people through that experience, then you really should use that instead of introducing new convoluted systems that make it even harder and longer to actually stay into the park. Just stop overextending everyone into merchandise and commit to something that is already ingrained into the DNA of what Disney is supposed to be, adding elements that makes every new visit worthwhile to the guest experience instead of boring people out from something you already did from before. This is literally the biggest aspect of their business and they don't even seem to treat it right anymore, acting more like a desperate company looking to get some money after the other units are just failing badly in their eyes, like the current issue with Disney Plus and the $200 million shows they produce all the time, and their box office failures in theaters constantly showing up amidst their others like ESPN and ABC to add more misery to their business model. Because above all, with what we mentioned before, the theme park guests are the biggest driving factors to why Disney is still able to stand 100 years later more than any other company has ever done, where just after what happened with COVID, they just wanted to max that out to the fullest potential. but I'm pretty sure they would able to make more money if they were willing to open it up to everyone for fair prices and actual decent projects that can actually flow the guest experience much more better with certain ease. Add something refreshing new and actually innovating instead of fresh coats of paint of the properties you already own, an issue I've already mentioned with California Adventure, with Pixar and Marvel in its current state, and translated to other parks like Epcot in that same time frame. And for me, Epcot is actually the prime example of how to actually ruin a theme park with its specific design, thinking in terms of newer attractions and experiences they release over the years like Guardians, Ratatouille, Frozen, and Moana. Because when you think of Epcot, it is often referred as a permanent World's Fair. It is dedicated to the celebration of human achievement, particularly technological innovation and international culture. But in recent times, it has been redesigned to be more Disney in that essence. Announced back in 2019, they were committed to actually redesign the park to actually make it more modern after the recent sting of failures in the early 90s to actually freshen it up. But the problem with this is that many of those projects they wanted to actually go through to reinvigorate the park is the fact that they've actually fell through due to COVID. Things like Harmonious being their new fireworks show have already actually ended, and the planned pavilion that you see in this picture was actually being reworked into something else, with the Mary Poppins ride actually seemingly quietly being cancelled. And although Guardians overall is an actual great attraction that was actually well designed and actually an upgrade compared to Ellen's universe of energy, it still moved into a different property from where the ideals of Epcot should be, and one that has already aged in some way, thinking in terms of the story of the Guardians that has Gamora and Star-Lord together still, that was actually filmed in the same time frame as Mission Breakout and the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie that is no longer relevant considering the current time frame of the MCU. It just doesn't make sense to what the park should be when it first actually opened. The same thing happening in the world of nature with the Journey of Water inspired by Moana, based upon a property sitting on the grounds of the former Communicore and the Innovations building. I mean, it is debatable to how you can actually work some of the original attractions in modern day for the park, but it's even more worse when you just actually stick things to under the Disney brand with no actual grand connective tissue or theme to what the idea was supposed to represent. It loses its identity into being something just owned by Disney. I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks great and it's fun for kids, but it actually feels like it belongs in a different park for something actually greater being under the name of the Moana brand, like Adventureland or Animal Kingdom would actually fit in that overall theme, where it just feels like they slotted into Epcot to just attract more modern audiences who don't know any better other than the movies you actually produce and actually watch. But the bigger problem with something like this is how slow such a project actually moved when it was supposed to open 2 years earlier. How every new constructed project they have, especially in Epcot, are actually being slow walked even though the entire point of the park is to keep innovating at every new term, things popping up every single year and actually growing bigger and better and faster than ever before. It's just not the case anymore where they don't have any sense of theme that they want for the park. But then again, some projects that actually have worked a little bit faster did actually have to be reworked, like some areas in Toontown that went back under construction when I went. The pavement was actually sinking because they finished it too earlier. Just no proper balance to what they should have done with these projects anymore. Something I think this new Spider-Man attraction at California Adventure also suffers from because of how it looks more like an arcade game rather than an actual Disney ride designed by Walt Disney Imagineering. Yes, they have an impressive animatronic that launches up and down, but that's only on the outside of the building, where the ride they designed specifically inside that has Tom Holland himself star in actually feels like a watered down version of Toy Story Mania that at the very least you can shoot your fingers like web slingers with. I mean, sure, it makes for a fun experience that you can actually shoot without actually holding anything else, but it just doesn't emit the same Disney feeling you had from before, like the time when Walt Disney actually introduced audio animatronics to the world with things like Abraham Lincoln and the Tiki Room, things that were just unbelievable when they actually came out at the time, compared to now where stuff like this actually just seems commonplace today. The screens have become a major criticism for many people because they don't innovate and they don't have any interactive elements. They're just screens that show you scenes of a specific thing that's happening around you. A thing people have criticism for other attractions like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which is actually fine for the most part since it is about the cartoon world and is neat with its trackless technology, but does leave you wanting more to be involved with a certain world. It's where you just have to point out that people actually like well-designed experiences to actually become invested in, the basic essence of parks like Disneyland that works because it entices people in a world they can't get anywhere else. People are still willing to go regardless of what has happened in the parks, where in 2022, 16.9 million people actually went to Disneyland, which is a huge return to pre-pandemic numbers similar to that of 2014, despite the new systems that were put into place that actually priced many people out of it. That we just love to experience it because it's unlike anything else in the entire world that has to offer. One where we can see people all around the world do when they actually go to places like for vacations or events or concerts or conventions that happen once a year. I speak about this because I recently did this by attending TwitchCon here in Vegas, something that is cheaper for obvious reasons for 3 days compared to Disneyland for just 2 days. I mean, the two are actually very different and are incomparable as experiences go, and the fact that I'm just obviously using this for business purposes, but I just bring this entire sequence up because people are just willing to experience things that can't get anywhere else. People just like going to events and coalescing together, only happening at least once a year at a specific location, and how theme parks like Disney and Universal can actually be attended all year round for people to experience. The best thing that anything else has to offer more than any event could ever do. But of course, you actually erode the importance of why it was there in the first place, by doing things like lessening the amount of attractions that are offered or shows and instead prop up new shops inside or virtual paywalls to skip the line. And on top of that, when you don't understand creative theme that is unique to the experience, you decide instead to browse your own catalog and put something there for the sake of being something new at the basic level. Just IP just because you own and nothing more. How Disney is a corporation that doesn't go big anymore with any new idea, and the people who actually do go to the ultimate resort destinations like Disney World instead get stressed out planning what they actually want to do, while Universal is experiencing a rise of new immersive projects and upcoming things like the Epic universe. It just comes to the point where we don't know what Disney wants to actually do, staying in this perpetual state of mediocrity by not actually going big like they did before. A time where if ideas don't work, they actually fix it, like Walt actually constantly did when he revamped Tomorrowland and other areas of Disneyland and providing new ways to entertain multiple people. Where now instead, they just slow walk everything they do and only announce something new if it seems right to put their latest animated movie or Star Wars or Marvel project in. And reducing the guest experience by only providing early entry to hotel guests at their own resorts that are only 30 minutes long rather than an hour from before, lessening incentives for everyone that people could have experienced earlier and actually allow more along the day. And when you actually think about that earlier system, it kind of lessens the point and argument about raising prices to actually control attendance, where that issue has not clearly worked considering the last time I went being more crowded than ever like before the pandemic. Once again, you just have to point out how lackluster their 100th anniversary has been this year, where everything is just not what it actually should be for this company that has such a profound impact on all of our lives in some way. How they didn't actually do much for the experience other than the merch and logos they actually performed on the castle, where the time I went for my recent trip is where they were actually kicking the Halloween season into gear. The shows and experience when I went, except for World of Color at California Adventure, were all centered around the usual seasonal offering rather than their official 100th birthday celebration for the entire company that happens here back in October. Nothing big actually happening upon the official anniversary of Disney other than the release of Once Upon a Studio on Disney Plus and everywhere else. I just can't believe that nothing grand actually happened the day of their own birthday, and it just instead felt like business being mostly as usual. Everything they are doing with the celebration feels lackluster compared to their own 60th anniversary of Disneyland Park. I went to that experience and it felt more grand than what they're trying to do for the 100th anniversary all around every single theme park they have to celebrate their very own company. And all of these issues I'm actually explaining is why I keep coming back. Because in my opinion, I believe it's important to make these issues apparent so that most consumers can actually make the right choice to actually change. I may contribute to the issue of actually being part of the guests who actually spend on it going to these parks and experience, but if I'm able to make thousands of people aware of that fact and they are able to tell others and so forth, then maybe things can actually change for the better. Through the concept others have actually mentioned before, being voting with your wallet. Go to another place to spend your money and actually spend your time elsewhere, where I'm just willing to go because I still care about the success of Walt's legacy and want to actually be a part of it to provide something new for the public each time. That there is that reason they have existed for this long. I know I've said it many times before in my last video, but I just wanted to say again because it's just so important to make aware before theme parks like Disney as we know it will actually slip away from the public's popularity. I mean, it's actually hard to see it doing so for things like Disneyland, but as long as they continue to make mediocre decisions, then it is very possible that that can actually happen. And that's what I want to make aware the most for the future. Going to these places to explore what they could offer rather than what they have offered. And with that said, I cannot wait for you to see what I have in store in the future in my new tour of all the Disney theme parks and their problems. And I'm all done, so goodbye.